Picture this. A young server just trying to earn an honest living gasps as a tray of nachos and a burger clatter to the linoleum. Looming over her are two muscular young men in Letterman jackets, sneering as one of them grabs a handful of her dark curls, wrenching her head backward. And the person who commanded this brutality, an immaculately dressed woman in a cream silk blouse, grinning as if she just won the jackpot. This is a tale about the moment unchecked privilege collided with unwavering authority, and the outcome was swift, crushing karma. Before we reveal how this catastrophe concludes, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Tales like this about justice delivered without mercy are what we do best here at Bully Tales, and you won't want to miss a single moment of what unfolds next. The Golden Fork Café on the outskirts of Riverside was meant to be Maya's new beginning. At 20, wearing her aunt's vintage serving apron cinched around her slim waist, and a hopeful sparkle in her hazel eyes that fought against a persistent anxiety, she viewed the retro chrome fixtures, the mint green vinyl booths, and the polished marble countertop as a platform for her self-reliance. The uniform, a butter-yellow dress with white piping, felt like a costume for an unfamiliar part, a self-sufficient grown-up. She desperately needed this position. The state university tuition invoices were mounting, a threatening storm on her horizon, and the cash tips rattling in the aprons of the veteran servers sounded like liberation. Maya was reserved, watchful, with a grin that bloomed naturally for familiar faces but wavered under stress. She was mastering the patterns of the dinner rush, the choreography of carrying 4 dishes along her forearm, the secret code of whiskey down and Adam's pet. Today the café was thrumming with its typical evening pandemonium, the symphony of silverware, the sizzle of the griddle, the gentle roar of countless conversations beneath the glow of Vintag. Edison bulbs advertising fresh-baked bread and espresso. The brass bell above the entrance chimed with a pleasant tone that utterly contradicted what it announced. Through the door strode Victoria Harrington. She was a person who entered any space as though she were assessing it for acquisition. Her piercing gray eyes sweeping, evaluating, and rejecting everything within their range. Her auburn hair was styled in a flawless French twist, not a single strand daring to rebel against its hold. Her cream silk blouse was designer label, a subtle display of calculated elegance, and it coordinated with the pearl studs in her ears and the Italian leather clutch dangling from her wrist, which tapped an irritated cadence against her forearm. Trailing behind her, like two unmatched sentinels, hulked Tyler and Marcus, her nephew and his closest companion. Their crimson and gold Letterman jackets emblazoned with a fierce eagle for Riverside High warriors seemed to amplify their already imposing physiques. They displayed the arrogant, disinterested faces of young athletes who believed their track scholarships elevated them to minor regional royalty. "We'll occupy the corner table, the one near the window, and I expect it sanitized thoroughly." With antibacterial solution, Victoria declared to the room at large, her voice slicing through the café's ambient noise like a blade. Maya, positioned closest to the entrance, hurried to accommodate, her pulse beginning a subtle, nervous rhythm against her chest. She rushed forward, wiping the already spotless laminate surface with a fresh cloth, positioning the napkin dispenser and hot sauce bottle precisely. "Your menus," Maya offered, her tone courteous but quiet, setting them on the table. Victoria didn't acknowledge her existence. "I have no need for a menu. I'll have an Equoise salad, vinaigrette on the side. Not beside the greens, in a separate container. And the tuna must be seared rare, not well-done rubber. The eggs must be soft-boiled, not hard, and the olives Kalamata, not those hideous canned black ones. The green beans al dente, not limp." She finally raised her eyes, cold and assessing. "Is your notepad recording all of this, or are you depending on your apparently insufficient memory?" Maya's face reddened. She'd been scribbling frantically. "I have it, ma'am." "Excellent." "For the boys," Victoria continued, gesturing with a dismissive flick of her manicured fingers, 2 triple-decker burgers, fully loaded. Extra bacon, jumbo fries, and caramel milkshakes. Dense, not watery. Tyler and Marcus collapsed into the booth, already snickering at something on Marcus's phone, their bulk making the furniture groan in protest. The order was a minefield, and Maya recognized it. The kitchen was overwhelmed, tickets were accumulating, and the cook, a weathered woman named Rosa, was in no frame of mind for elaborate modifications. She submitted the order, wincing as Rosa muttered a curse about salad tyrants. When the meals finally materialized, Maya's hands trembled slightly as she arranged the hefty tray. She maneuvered through the crowded walkway with focused precision, the weight of the food feeling metaphorical, a representation of this woman's pure, undiluted entitlement. She approached the table, her smile forced. "Here you are," she announced, lowering the tray onto the stand adjacent to the booth. She attended to the boys first, positioning the enormous grease-stained burgers before them. They ignored her completely, already seizing the food with both fists. Then, cautiously, she moved to place Victoria's elaborate salad in front of her. This was the instant destiny decided to interfere, or perhaps to lay a snare. As she leaned forward, Marcus, cramming a handful of fries into his mouth, chose to stretch. His elbow, thick and muscular, thrust outward and struck squarely against Maya's wrist. It wasn't a subtle bump. It was a jarring, destabilizing impact. The exquisite, meticulous Niçoise salad, the container of vinaigrette, the artfully arranged ingredients positioned just so, launched from the dish. It soared through the atmosphere in a slow-motion trajectory of egg, tuna, and beans before landing with a wet, pitiful splat directly in Victoria Harrington's lap. The cream silk blouse was instantaneously decorated with balsamic reduction, capers, and a sheen of olive oil. The café didn't merely go silent. It descended into a void of absolute quiet. Every clatter, every dialogue, every sizzle from the kitchen seemed to be extracted from the atmosphere. All that persisted was the terrible dripping sound from Victoria's lap and the sharp, terrified intake of breath from Maya, whose hands shot to her face. Victoria stared down at her devastated outfit. She didn't shriek. She didn't gasp. A chilling, serene iciness descended over her features. She looked up at Maya, who was stammering, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. He bumped me. It was an accident. I'm so sorry. I'll get towels immediately." "You," Victoria pronounced, her voice a low, controlled thread of absolute poison, "clumsy, moronic little fool." She rose, allowing the ruined salad to tumble to the floor with a splat. "This blouse is Armani. It cost more than you'll earn in 4 months of spilling trays and stumbling over your own incompetence. It was an accident, ma'am. Please, I'll cover the dry cleaning." Emma's words cascaded out, tears of panic and mortification welling in her eyes. "Dry cleaning?" Victoria released a short, brittle laugh. "You believe this concerns cleaning? This concerns accountability. This concerns consequences." She rotated her head, her eyes locating her nephew and his friend. Her voice transformed, became disturbingly casual, an aunt asking her boys to handle some trivial task. "Tyler. Marcus. This little wretch needs to understand a lesson. Demonstrate." For a heartbeat, the boys appeared puzzled, their mouths stuffed with burger. Then Tyler's face divided into a slow, comprehending smirk. This was entertainment, authorized entertainment. He and Marcus exchanged a glance, a wordless communication born of years of shared arrogance and entitlement. They extracted themselves from the booth, their Letterman jackets transforming them into uniformed thugs. "No, please," Maya whispered, retreating, her shoe catching on the spilled food. "I apologize." The other customers were paralyzed. An elderly woman at the counter clutched her teacup, her knuckles bone white, but she remained motionless. A couple in a neighboring booth drew their teenage daughter nearer, staring down at their own meals. The paralysis of the witness, the stunning audacity of the command, had woven a spell of ine. "Retire." Tyler reached her first. He didn't strike her with a fist. He didn't shove her. With a contemptuous grin, his hand lunged forward and seized the dark curls that had escaped from her server's cap. He yanked viciously, pulling her head backward, forcing a cry of agony and shock from her throat. Marcus, chuckling, approached from the side and grabbed her shoulder, twisting her body awkwardly. They weren't delivering knockout blows. They were administering humiliation, a public degradation commissioned by their empress. Maya crumpled, cowering, attempting to protect her face with her free hand, sobs of terror and shame racking her frame as they manhandled her over the debris on the floor. Victoria observed, arms folded, a satisfied gleam in her eye. This was justice in her twisted universe. This was how equilibrium was reinstated. And then the brass bell above the door chimed once more. This time the sound was a declaration. Every eye, drawn by the magnetic horror of the scene, shifted toward the entrance. Standing there, having just observed the entire repulsive spectacle, was an older woman. She possessed a quiet, commanding aura, a face carved with the lines of profound contemplation and deep judgment. Her silver hair was pulled back in an elegant bun, and she was wearing a complete formal black judicial robe. It was as though someone had frozen the cosmos. The federal magistrate, whose name was Eleanor Pritchard, had arrived from a citizenship ceremony at the adjacent courthouse. She wanted a peaceful cup of tea and a slice of lemon cake before returning to her chambers to examine case files. She was a woman who had devoted 35 years on the bench listening to the darkest aspects of human conflict, presiding over organized crime trials, government fraud cases, and acrimonious civil disputes. She possessed a well-documented, nearly legendary contempt for bullies. She believed the law was armor for the defenseless, not a tool for the privileged. And what she witnessed in that café was a perfect, ugly representation of everything she despised. She didn't bellow. She didn't charge forward. She simply stepped completely inside, allowing the door to close behind her. The gravity of her presence was tremendous, a shockwave of authority that shattered the bystander enchantment. Victoria's smug expression wavered, replaced by a flicker of bewildered wonderment. Who was this elderly woman in costume? Tyler and Marcus, sensing a disturbance in the atmosphere, relaxed their grip on Maya, who collapsed to her knees on the filthy floor, weeping. Judge Pritchard advanced, her steps deliberate and measured on the tiled floor. The sound of her leather shoes was the solitary sound in the establishment. She halted several feet from Victoria, her eyes traveling from her furious face to her sneering nephew to the devastated server on the ground. Her gaze was calm, analytical, and utterly terrifying in its absence of emotion. It was the cold, evaluating stare of a woman who wielded the power of the United States District Court in her grasp. "Release her," she stated. Her voice was not raised, but it resonated, deep and commanding. The voice of a woman accustomed to being obeyed in the most solemn of chambers. Tyler, emboldened by his jacket and the lingering adrenaline of cruelty, puffed out his chest. "Who are you, old lady? This isn't your business." Judge Pritchard ignored him. She looked directly at Victoria. "You will order them to release her immediately." Victoria located her voice, shrill and screeching with indignant fury. "How dare you? This incompetent imbecile destroyed a $3,000 blouse. She received precisely what she deserved. This is none of your concern, you senile old woman. Mind your own affairs." A faint, almost invisible tightening manifested around the judge's eyes. She reached into the inner pocket of her robe. The entire café held its collective breath. She extracted not a weapon, but a small leather credential case. She opened it, displaying it so Victoria, and then the two boys, could observe clearly. The gold emblem of the United States District Court gleamed under the café's warm lighting. Adjacent to it was her official photograph and identification. "I am Senior United States District Judge Eleanor Pritchard," she declared, her voice now permeating every corner of the silent room. "And as of this moment, it is very much my concern." The color evacuated from Victoria's face so thoroughly, it was as though someone had activated a drain. The cream of her blouse now mocked her pallor. Tyler and Marcus's bravado evaporated instantly. Their hands fell away from Maya as if she'd become molten. The Letterman jackets suddenly resembled costumes for children masquerading as adults. Judge Pritchard didn't pause. She knelt down with measured difficulty beside Maya. She assisted her to her feet, her hands gentle on Maya's trembling arms. "Are you injured, young woman?" she inquired, her voice softening exclusively for her. Maya, shaking uncontrollably, could only nod, then shake her head, overwhelmed. "Please go sit behind the counter," she instructed softly. "Someone call the police immediately." Maya stumbled away, the café manager finally emerging from his stupor and rushing to her assistance, phone already in his grasp. The judge then pivoted back to the trio. She was no longer simply a woman. She was the incarnation of the law. "You two," she stated to Tyler and Marcus, "sit in that booth. Do not move a muscle." They scrambled to comply, sliding into the booth they'd just abandoned, their earlier swagger replaced by the terrified stillness of cornered animals. She then concentrated on Victoria. "Your name?" Victoria sputtered. "You have no authority." "Your full legal name," she repeated, the tone eliminating any room for discussion. It was the voice that had commanded cartel leaders and corrupt politicians. "Victoria. Victoria and Harrington," she whispered, the fight extinguished. "Ms. Harrington," the judge began, and she commenced speaking. But this was not an outburst. It was a verbal pronouncement delivered with the precision and devastating impact of a gavel strike. What I witnessed here was not a simple accident or disagreement. It was a conspiracy to commit assault. It was the solicitation of battery. You, as an adult, deliberately ordered two individuals to inflict physical harm and profound psychological trauma upon a young woman engaged in her lawful employment. You did so under the spurious justification of property damage, a civil matter you grotesquely and illegally attempted to resolve with violence. She advanced a step closer, and Victoria retreated against the booth. "You are not a judge. You are not a jury. Yet you appointed yourself as executioner and imposed a punishment of humiliation and pain. In my courtroom, individuals who believe they transcend the law, who believe their wealth or their rage grants them dominion over the bodies and rights of others, learn a very harsh, very enduring lesson." She then regarded the two young men who were attempting to vanish into the vinyl seats. "And you too. You wore the insignia of your school on your jackets as you committed a felony. You disgrace those letters. You disgrace the concept of discipline and honor they are meant to represent. Your athletic ability is not a license for brutality. It is a privilege. And as of this moment, it is a privilege I will ensure is exhaustively examined by every relevant authority." Victoria discovered a final desperate reserve of defiance. "You can't do anything. This is a café. You're not in your courtroom. This is hearsay." Judge Pritchard almost smiled, a thin, glacial curve of her lips. "You are correct that this is not my courtroom. But the assault I witnessed with my own eyes is a matter for state jurisdiction. However," she paused, allowing the word to suspend, "as a federal judge, I am also an officer of the court anywhere in this nation. The witness intimidation I am observing, your attempts to terrorize a victim and coerce bystanders into silence, is a federal concern. The deprivation of rights under color of authority, which your orchestration of this attack arguably constitutes, is most certainly a federal concern." She straightened to her full height. "I am placing all three of you under citizen's arrest until law enforcement arrives. And upon their arrival, I will be providing a comprehensive sworn statement as both a witness and as a judge. I will also be making personal communications to the district attorney, the athletic director of Riverside University W. Here I assume these young men hold athletic scholarships, and the board of directors of whatever corporation employs you, Ms. Harrington, if you are in fact gainfully employed." With each word, each layer of legal reality she exposed, their world disintegrated. Victoria was no longer an aristocrat. She was a defendant. Tyler and Marcus were no longer warriors. They were perpetrators. Their future scholarships, their athletic careers, their pristine records dissolving before their very eyes. The wait for law enforcement was the longest 12 minutes of their existence. Judge Pritchard assumed a seat at the counter, accepting a cup of chamomile tea from a stunned but grateful Rosa. She sat serene and immovable, a monument to justice, sipping from a ceramic mug, while the trio she'd cornered sat in petrified silence. When the two uniformed officers finally entered, the judge rose and greeted them by name. She delivered her statement with calm, forensic precision. The other patrons, emboldened, stepped forward to provide theirs. Video footage discreetly captured by the elderly woman was offered as evidence. The police officers listened, their expressions growing increasingly grave as the narrative unfolded. They handcuffed Tyler and Marcus, reading them their rights. They placed Victoria in restraints as well, her Italian leather clutch appearing absurd, dangling from her restricted wrist. As she was escorted out, she glanced back at Judge Pritchard, her face a portrait of utter devastation and dawning, horrifying comprehension. The hammer had not simply been dropped. It had been dropped from a tremendous height with the full force of a lifetime's dedication to the law propelling it. In the weeks that followed, the ripples expanded. The district attorney, under the vigilant scrutiny of Judge Pritchard's influence, prosecuted them to the fullest extent. Victoria pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit assault, witness intimidation, and multiple other charges to avoid trial, receiving a sentence of 21 months in prison, plus substantial restitution to Maya. Tyler and Marcus, prosecuted as adults, witnessed their scholarships revoked. Instantaneously. They pleaded guilty to assault and battery, receiving probation, hundreds of hours of community service, and a permanent mark on their records that no championship victory could ever erase. Their names became synonymous with privilege and disgrace in Riverside. Maya, with the pro bono legal assistance from a firm the judge quietly recommended, sued Victoria in civil court. The settlement was sufficient to cover her university education completely with substantial funds remaining. She didn't remain at the Golden Fork Café. With the judge's encouragement, she applied to and was admitted into a criminal justice program. The victim had discovered her vocation in the very system that had vindicated her. The story concludes not with applause, but with a quiet, profound sense of restoration. In a retro café, an everyday sanctuary of the American public, the law had appeared for duty. It had reminded everyone observing that the rules do apply universally, that protection exists for those who require it, and that sometimes karma doesn't merely wear a robe, it wears the robe with absolute authority. Judge Pritchard had a final piece of wisdom for Maya, and for anyone who would listen: the law is only as formidable as the people who believe in it. Be one of those people. This was a story about a blouse, a café, and the devastating power of dignity confronting degradation. It reminds us that authority is not about volume but about weight, about presence, about the unwavering commitment to justice. And if stories like this resonate with you, if you believe that bullies should face consequences and that justice should always prevail, make sure you're subscribed to Bully Tales. Hit that subscribe button and join our community where we share these powerful stories of karma and accountability. From which corner of the world are you watching this today? Let us know in the comments below, and tell us about a time you witnessed justice being served. We read every comment, and your stories inspire the content we create. Until next time, remember, the law exists to protect the powerless, and sometimes it arrives exactly when it's needed most.